Yes, indeed. We are all part of one heart. Well, good to be back with you again. And thank you, Reverend Donna, for stepping in last week. And we will get that recording posted so we can all see it. I haven't seen it yet, but thank you for stepping in and honoring mothers and with that message. So I'm going to be with you for the next 3 weeks. Normally I take 2 Sundays off on 5 Sunday months, but I decided I want to kind of get a little continuity going here, so I'm going to be with you at the end of the month and then again in June, of course. So this is the book that we started 2 weeks ago. It's called Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. It's time to come in. The door must be locked. It's sticky, yeah. Anyway, so what's this topic, sticky, embracing conflict. In fact, today's message, it almost sounds like an oxymoron to say befriending conflict, doesn't it? Because isn't it sort of the normal human reaction when we think of conflict as something that we would push away, that we would not want, that we would avoid, that we would do an end run? I mean, who embraces conflict, right? You must be crazy. You must be, what's the word? Crazy. Masochist. You like to suffer, do you? And so, yeah, so how is it that we can adopt that attitude of embracing or befriending conflict and still remain authentic? Because we're not interested in some sort of New Age Pollyannish whitewashing of reality, are we? We're really, if we're going to say that I'm befriending conflict, it needs to come from some authentic place, yes? So that's really what today's message is about. But before I get into that, I'm going to read the introduction, which I threatened that I would read every Sunday during this series, because it really sets the tone for the entire premise of what this series is about, what this teaching is about, which is foundational to unity, as well as foundational to this approach to healing. No one is against you. Isn't that good news? You had a story going on, but hey, guess what? It's not true. This is the absolute truth. What do we know about absolute? Does it ever vary? Like a law, you say something is a law, that means there's no exceptions, right? Have we ever said there's only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, omnipotent, except? You know who I'm talking about. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary. But until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and your truth. The purpose of this book is to awaken you to the truth that there is only one power and one presence at work in your life, and that this presence and this power lives in you as the Spirit of God. For this reason, no one or nothing can be against you. You see the logic? Right? To realize this is to claim your divine inheritance as a beloved creation of God. Yes? So that's the premise, and we're sticking to it, right? But we do have this story going on. And the story is, and we all come by this honestly, so when we begin to sort of get this sort of radical honesty that it really takes for us to realize the truth of our experience and how it has more to do with what's going on inside of us, we do that with compassion. We do that with a gentle acknowledgement. We don't do it so that we can further diminish ourselves, because does anyone think that that's a good idea? That maybe if we make ourselves feel smaller, that somehow we'll feel better about it? No, it's not. It's about having this sort of honesty so that we can really get to the source of the problem, as opposed to having stories that go on that continually have us attributing the source of our discomfort being outside of ourselves. Yes? And as soon as someone says, well, maybe you need to look at that, we all get a little uncomfortable, don't we? Because we don't want to look at it. Let's just say this, there's a part of us that doesn't want to look at it. But there's another part of us that resonates with what Jesus said about the truth. What was that? That it will set us free. So this notion of sort of warming up to the idea of really finding the source of our discomfort and not keep running a story that keeps our freedom at bay because we're stuck in a story that is not connected to the truth of who we are, then the motivation comes maybe at the end of a long journey for many of us where we have suffered long and hard. And we have tried to re-landscape our life. We've tried to get people to change. We've tried to get people to be nicer to us. We've tried to, get life to show up in a particular way so that we feel okay about life. And we've done that, and we've done it over and over again, and we've gotten the same result. Nothing changes, right? Or maybe if it does change a little bit, it's temporal. It's a moment. It's a slight shift. But then we're back again feeling that same feeling of, it's not enough, or life is against me. Now this situation is opposing my well-being. That ongoing pattern, when we've seen it long enough, when we play this illusion out that life just needs to be a certain way in order for me to be okay. When we've suffered long and hard enough with that story, then maybe we get to the point where we are willing to be radically honest and realize that the one constant in all of our experiences of suffering has been who? We've been there. We've been there in every one of those moments, right? And so then, maybe there's a curiosity, maybe there's a willingness that comes from suggesting that maybe we've just got to stop looking outside of ourselves and really looking where the source of the discomfort is. Because isn't it really here? Don't we feel it in our body? Don't we feel it in our stomach or in our heart or in our throat, or when we get upset, when we get angry, when we get hurt? Isn't there's the experience is here. It isn't this person, right, or this situation. The feeling is here. And what happens is that when we begin to look, we realize that so the story, if we're trying to reconcile the notion that there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and that's not our experience in this moment, then isn't it true that the only way that can be is that it doesn't come from experience of who we are, it must come from the experience of what? If it doesn't come from who we are, then what must it come from? Who we're not, right? It can only be when I'm relating to life from my false sense of who I am that I can suffer. Because if I'm relating to who and what I truly am, there's experience of wholeness and well-being and love and peace and prosperity and abundance and all the things that we know to be the truth, yes, of the one presence and the one power. And we say that it's what? We say it's just here and it's there and it's in that person, and Jesus and Buddha, but not us. We say it's omnipresent, which means there's no spot where God is not. And if that's true, and I mean, I pray for you if you don't think it is, because then you're stuck. You're stuck in being a victim in this life. But if you know it to be true intellectually, and you hearken to it as a principle that you yearn to know, then the rest of the journey is really what we're here to talk about. It's not to make that true, because it already is. It's to reveal its truth in us. That's the work. That's the journey. That's the challenge. And it's not for the wimps. It's not for the weak. It's for the courageous, the spiritual warrior in you. We all have this capacity to move through the discomfort that comes to the recognition that we are holding certain attitudes and beliefs in ourselves that are responsible for the way that we are having our life. Because it isn't what's happening in our life, it's how we're being what our life experiences that determine our experience. Is that not true? When we're really being honest. Now we can rail against life, we can rant and chant against, life and people and circumstances. But somehow at the end of all of that ranting, we still find that the source of our discomfort is where? It's here. It's within us. So, but the good news is that the source of our discomfort is here, but the source of our well-being is also where? Within us. Yes. So the dissonance or the lack of experiencing well-being in you and I doesn't have to do with what we are fundamentally, what we are in our essence. It has to do with who we have taken ourselves to be, who we have believed ourselves to be, which has a heightened sensitivity to life needing to be a certain way for us to be okay. Does this make sense? And we all came by it honestly because it all happened when we were young, innocent children, typically. We came to believe things about ourselves, that we're not lovable, we're not adequate, we're not smart enough, we're not whatever enough, some sense of unworthiness. Do we know this one? And we all have it. So don't, it's not about just some people have it. Everybody has it. Some people joke that unless Mary and Joseph were your parents, you didn't grow up believing you were the Christ, But it's really true that it's just there. It just happens. And we can have compassion even for our caregivers. It's not about like bashing mom and dad because, they were imperfect parenting, for their imperfect parenting. Because they were doing the best they could, right? Given what they had, what they knew, their consciousness at the time, what they experienced in their life, they did the best that they could. Now, you may think that it should have been better, but good luck with that story. Because it's not going to change that. But what can change that is when we begin to realize that the source of our discomfort in life and how we're experiencing life has to do with how we're being with that. In other words, the meaning making that we give to experiences in our life is what results in the way we feel about it. Isn't that true? I mean, in fact, if you don't think it's true, I mean, you can think of examples where you've been really upset by something and you tell a friend, like, hey, this happened and she said this and he did that, and your friend listens to it and goes, and they have a completely different reaction to it, like, oh, gosh, they must have been really, frustrated and sad, and in order to, and you're like, no, they were being mean and vicious and awful, and they had no respect for me, and we have a completely different story than somebody else does. So it's like we bring ourselves, as we've been conditioned in our life, to life, right? Life is neutral. I mean, life does what life does, right? And people do what they do. And then how we react to that has to do with the meaning making that we apply to those circumstances. Yeah? And so if someone is critical of me, someone gets in my face about something, and I have this sense of unworthiness, is it really my unworthiness that reacts to that? It's not what they said. And if I was connected with my wholeness and my self-worth, and someone criticized me, would I feel diminished? No, because how would it be possible if I feel whole and complete in myself, which is my true nature, how would it be possible for me to feel diminished by someone's criticism of me? Now, I may observe it and I may notice that, oh, they said it this way and they did it that way, but I wouldn't feel diminished, right? I wouldn't necessarily have to defend myself or attack them back. So what we're here to do, and this is, of course, this is the high teaching that Jesus came to talk about when he said, love your enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you. And those 4 lines that are in there are like, really? Yeah, well, I'm not Jesus, But then on the other hand, he said, yes, you are. He said, these things that I have done, so shall you do. And even greater things. And the greater things are possible, and I was talking with someone earlier this week about this, is that, we've come a long way in 2,000 years. I mean, in some ways you could say we haven't come very far at all. But the evolution of consciousness has been taking place. And there are more people that are waking up spiritually today, ordinary people that are waking up spiritually. It used to be that you had to go into one of these mystery schools, and you had to be selected to be worthy to go through the training to have this spiritual practice and this realization. But today, people are waking up just in the just by the exposure to the truth and by the evolution of consciousness, because we are becoming more and more aware of how our experience of life has to do with how we interact with life. We are becoming less dependent upon circumstances being a particular way in order for us to be okay. And that's really what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is not seeing yourself as separate. It's not seeing yourself as this temporary person that's subject to disease and death, and that you are not a finite being. You're an infinite being. And more people are waking up to that realization. So we have a better chance than we've ever had to follow this path, to recognize that we have within us the capacity to heal and to grow and to exceed our circumstances and to get on the other side of these upsets in a way that is more connected with the truth of us. Would that sound good? Yeah, and to know that it's possible makes it all better. And I think that what I've noticed is that the times in my life when I have made the greatest shifts have been the times when I've been deeply hurt. Does anyone know this? Where you feel so bereft of knowing how to deal with something. You're so impacted traumatically that you kind of are at the edge of your resources, the edge of what you know to do. And if you have ever been to a therapist or you've ever worked with a spiritual teacher, and you come to them and you say, I'm lost. I'm beside myself. I don't know what to do. I truly don't know. I'm flummoxed by this situation, and I don't know. And a good therapist or a good spiritual teacher will go, hallelujah. And you'll be like, what? This is not good news. And they say, oh, but it is. Because when you finally get to the point where you don't know, you stand on this edge, and the unknown is before you, right? That abyss of not knowing, that is exactly where your next level of awakening awaits. It's when you finally surrender, because we think we know. We know why we feel the way we do. We can name it. We can point fingers. We can say, it's this person, it's that person, it's that situation, it's the government, it's the taxes, it's the faxes, it's the whatever, We have all these stories going on. And we can finally let go of the story and say, I don't know what to do. Then that's the invitation that the universe has been waiting for to reveal the truth, right? And the truth comes on the other side of a surrender. It's really in not knowing that we have the capacity to know more. It's in not knowing that we open ourselves up to a new reality. And that new reality is knowing the source of my well-being, the source of my discomfort are within me. And that may not come until maybe you have really suffered long enough, and you have used up all of your other excuses to sort of name and blame and shame the external world. And then to realize, wait, if I was connected to the truth of who I am right now, would I be having this experience? And if you're being really honest and you can see through the illusion that you've been holding on to, you recognize, no, I wouldn't be feeling that way. So I'm going to stop blaming circumstances in my life for the way I'm feeling. Doesn't mean that you become a doormat or that you become welcoming abuse in your life. None of that. We're not talking about behavior. We're talking about an understanding of the source of your discomfort, that it comes from a belief that you hold inside of yourself, a belief of not enough or inadequate or unworthy or unlovable or whatever. We all have them, and people and circumstances in our life are designed to be the activator of those things so that we can see what stands in the way of our wholeness and our well-being. And what stands in the way of our experience of wholeness and well-being has nothing to do with the event or the circumstance or the person or the thing, but that is the trigger that reveals it so that we can see that there it is. This is where I'm still not free. This is where I'm still not free. And that is reason for celebration, for hallelujah and gratitude. Because unless you know the source of your discomfort, it's like when you go to the doctor, they go, we don't know why you have this pain. We don't know why you have these symptoms. I don't know. And then they go, wait a minute, we just took one more x-ray and we just found out. You have a broken toe or something. Like, oh, yeah, that's why my toe hurts. So when you know where the source of the discomfort is, then you know where to address the healing energy. Yes. And then you can call off the search for this illusory promised land when life was going to be perfect. Well, we all want life to be perfect, right? But what if it's perfect right now for what you came here for? What if your purpose is to come here to awaken to the truth of who you are? What if that's your purpose? We say it is, right? I mean, what could be higher than to know what you are and to realize it and to express it, your divine nature? So then is it possible that you could see that life is for you? Everything, not just the stuff you like. It's all for you. How could that be? Because I'm here to awaken to the truth of my being. And anything that stands in the way, I want to see through that. I want to get on the other side of it. But I know that I'm going to get on the other side of it by going through it. But the only way I'm going to see it for what it is by going through it and recognizing the dynamics of my own reaction to life events is a window unto the source of my discomfort and what I need to do to heal. Because we don't know that life's going to get any better, right? We can hope that it's going to get better. But what if it doesn't? Are you going to keep buying lottery tickets until all your money is gone? Or are you going to begin to harvest the good that is already here and use these spiritual principles in a way that will help you transcend your suffering by realizing that the cause of your suffering is not outside yourself, which makes you powerless, but the cause of your suffering is within you. And there, that is what? Empowering. Yes? And that's what we're here for. We're here to empower each other to live lives that are filled with peace and love and joy, but not by some sort of a wholesale, revamping of the world to meet our preferences, because that puts us in a victim, powerless stance. So I just want to share a little story with you, an example of this in my own life. Shameless self-disclosure. And this was a long time ago, but it still stands out as one of the most powerful moments in which this became my understanding. It was in my very first church, so this is like 20-some years ago, and things were going along pretty well, and it's about my third year there. The board decided they were going to do an evaluation of me, which is normal and expected. And in the evaluation, they pointed out things about me that they thought needed to be improved, which is also expected and normal. But what happened for me was that they named things that I felt should not be expected of a minister, and they overlooked all the things that should be expected of a minister that I was doing very well. In other words, I felt the evaluation was unfair, okay? And that they were just raising all of my weaknesses that shouldn't have mattered, and they were overlooking my strengths. And anyway, so that's my interpretation, right? You gotta own it. I had evidence, just like we all do. No, they said this, they said that, they said this, and then you got your case, you're ready to go to trial, Anyway, so at the end of that session where they did this evaluation, I was devastated. And I sort of spoke on my own behalf, and things got out of hand, and they became more aggressive and upset, and it was not good. You've been there, Really, really not good at all. So I went, it was a Saturday, and I went home that night. I had to get up the next day and be the light of the world, give this inspiring Sunday talk. And I was angry, and I was so hurt, and I was so frustrated. And you might know that this had to do with my own core issues, right? Grew up in a family where I was not, seen. I was sort of, under the table, hiding most of the time. It was a dysfunctional family, and blah, blah, blah. Mom and dad doing the best they could, and kids, took some of the brunt of that. But anyway, so that Sunday morning, I'm sitting there, I'm trying to come up with this talk that I'm going to talk about. And I just struggled, and I finally came downstairs and talked to my wife. I said, I don't think I can go and be this minister today. I'm just too upset, and I'm too angry, and I can't get on the other side of it. I don't know what to do. And Denise looked at me, and it was just like so clear in her head. She just said, well, have you thought of surrendering? Surrender, wait a minute, I think I've heard that word before. Anyway, and I just looked at her and I went, what do you mean surrender? And she goes, just give it up. I mean, you're trying to figure this out in your head, but give it over to God, surrender, let go, What else, you tried everything else. Maybe this is the time, So I went back upstairs and sat down on my meditation cushion. And I just sat there, and I was just feeling these waves of anger, frustration, and hurt were just sort of revisiting me. And I thought, okay, I got to surrender. So I just said, all right, I give this over to you. I surrender. And I did this for like 10 minutes, and nothing happened. And I realized I was doing it in a rote way. You know what I mean? Like we're just, I surrender. But then in a moment, when the mind just got out of it, and I went here, what does surrender really mean? I mean, really letting go. Just let it go. Let go of your story of how wrong they are and how you've been wronged and all. Just let it all go. Just as if you are really open to another way of seeing this without having any idea what that possibly could be. And as I did that, and I could feel it was like my heart was like concrete, and it was just starting to just shake. And it would like crack, it cracked open. I could just feel my heart just open. And there was like this energy that came down from the top of my head, down through my whole body, just like this wave of this nectar of peace. It just washed down through my body. I swear it was just like someone had just given you like the best painkiller, and just all of the suffering just went away. And I just felt this incredible calm and this optimism about the situation. Nothing had changed, you understand. But I just felt like I can go to church today. I don't know what I'm even going to say in my talk, but it's all fine. It's all good. And It was visceral, do you understand? It wasn't a mental thing. It wasn't like, okay, well, I'll say this, and then I'll do that, and then this is why it's all good. No, it was just like my being was at peace in my body. And so I went to church, and it was before the service started, and I was walking through the sanctuary, and I actually decided to stand at the back and just sort of be in the room, and sort of check in. And the board president came up to me. She was the one who I had the most of an issue with, and she had been the most vocal. And she came up to me, and she had love in her eyes. And she said, I just want you to know that I know we're going to work this out. And I said, well, this morning I was sitting in meditation, and I just had this surrender. I just did this surrender, and I had this feeling of the same thing, that this is all going to be okay. And she said, what time was that? I said, it was about 7:30. She said, that's the time that I felt that same thing in me. And I didn't have any more answers or how it was going to be better, but I knew, without any logic, but just the sense was that this was all going to happen. And then two other board members, I know this sounds freaky, had the same experience. So I don't know how any of this stuff works, folks. But what I do know is when I was at wit's end, when I was in so much suffering with the story of how those people were against me, and I had evidence, right? And they had their evidence for me, right? And somehow grace was greater than those stories. But there had to be an act of surrender. There had to be a giving over of what I think should be and how they should be and who and what is responsible for my pain. I had to let it all go for there to be this enlightenment, this lightening up, right? This letting go of the story. So I commend it to you. I don't want anyone to suffer unnecessarily. And sometimes we do have to suffer for a while until we get to that edge where we realize there's only thing left is to jump into this chasm of uncertainty, which is surrender. Because I think that's when our giving up, or let's say giving way, is what allows spirit to be the updraft that holds us and brings us into our right mind, brings us into a state of connection with the truth of us, which can be with life however it is, and we don't feel diminished. Because that's the truth. And sometimes we have to go through a lot of false before we actually get to the truth. Amen? So let's take a moment as we take this message inside. And take a breath with me as whatever we are holding about our own story of discomfort, we blow it out here in this breath. We just remember the words of Master Teacher Jesus, who said, it's the truth that will set you free. There will be trials and tribulations. That's just the condition. But we're not stuck with our reaction to life. We have the capacity to remain connected with the truth of who we are, and to give up the stories that would seem to indicate that life or people, circumstances can be against us. But it's only possible for life to be against who we are not. So our prayer is that we have the courage and the clarity and the insight. And when we suffer, when life seems to be against us. That we have the capacity and the willingness to turn it over, to let that story go, and to find where it is within us that we are blocking the flow of love. We're blocking the awareness of love's presence, the peace that passes all human understanding. That whereas we have been in the way of God, we may become the way of God. This is surrender. This is awakening. This is the truth that shall set us free.